Everyone has to live somewhere, and everyone has to invest their money someplace. So what happens when where you live meets up with where your money is invested? Hello, real estate. And welcome back to Big Money Real Estate. I'm Ilyce. Here's your daily update. There's a new report out from the National Association of Realtors on widening inequality in the vast majority of major metropolitan areas in the U.S. And a sizable chunk of that disparity can actually be rooted in trends we're seeing in the housing market. So I'm happy to welcome a new face today from the National Association of Realtors office in D.C. Danielle Hale is their Director of Housing Statistics, and she's going to fill us in on the details of the report. Danielle, welcome to Big Money Real Estate.
Thanks for having me, Ilyce.
So what did your report find, sort of on the high concept level?
Well, what we found is that in a time when housing prices are rising, which is building up a lot of equity for current homeowners, we're finding that the number of homeowners is decreasing. So while increasing housing wealth is great, what this means is that it's going to fewer and fewer people.
So according to Lawrence Yun, who's the chief economist over at NAR, he says that the decline in homeownership has serious implications for our economy, and he thinks is leading to a more unequal America. And I've known Lawrence for a very long time. The decline in homeownership is now what, at 63%?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So what was it at the high, 68, 69%?
We got up to 69%, that's right. And what that means when we're talking about percentages is just that among the households that are out there, 69% of them are homeowning households.
So is the report saying to you that because rent prices are just going up, that's eating up more of their gross monthly income without providing any sort of a payback in terms of rising home prices? Is that kind of what the report gets at?
Yeah, it's showing that the rising equity or the rising prices increasing equity, which is great for current homeowners, but it increases some of the challenges for renters because not only are housing prices rising, it makes it a little bit more difficult for them to qualify to buy a home. They're, as you mentioned, seeing rent increases, which makes it difficult for them to save for the down payment to get into a home. And this data from the Federal Reserve shows that homeownership is a great means of wealth creation. So homeowners typically have a net worth that's roughly around $200,000, whereas renters typically have a net worth that's only closer to $5,000. And it's interesting to note that the median priced home is right around $200,000. So for a lot of homeowning households, owning a home is a great way for them to build up wealth. And they do this by seeing prices rise, but also just by paying down their mortgage. Every month when you put your money towards your mortgage, some of that goes to pay off the interest on the money that you borrowed, but some of that goes to build up equity, by the way, that you're paying down the principal.
So is there anything in here that talks to the age skewing of this? Because typically renters are younger. The average age of first-time homebuyers is now well over 30. It's closing in on 33 or 34. We're seeing people get married later. They're hopefully going to buy houses later. But are we skewing these numbers? Are the reports skewing the numbers because the younger people are renting and super old people, I guess, are renting, but folks in the middle would typically be homeowners? How are you guys looking at that?
Yeah, so certainly, as you mentioned, the age of the typical first-time buyer had been around 30. It's now up to about 31 now. It's creeping up really slowly. Interestingly, it hasn't risen as quickly as the age at first marriage. So we haven't seen that yet, though that may be in the data that's still to come. So, but what we've seen is that this trend has been stable over time. That over time, renters tend to have a lower net worth. And as you mentioned, age is certainly a contributing factor there. Homeowners tend to have higher net worth. But one of the reasons that homeowners have higher net worth is because they've been able to use their home as a store of value and amass some equity over time by paying down their mortgage a little bit each month.
Do you find that, and this is an interesting statistic, I mean, the typical mortgage is only kept for maybe 2 years, 3 years. People are only staying in these homes 5 to 7 years typically, or maybe it's getting a little bit longer. And so the way that my mom built up home equity was literally staying in the property for 43 years and has already been in a new property for 11 years. My husband and I have been in our home for 20 years. it's really about length. So if you're not keeping the mortgage and you're not paying that down every month and you're not actually staying in the home for longer than 5 to 7 years, are you ever actually going to see that equity build up?
You're right. It does take time to build up equity because there are transaction costs associated with buying a home and moving. What we found is that in our home buyer and seller survey, we found that before the housing crisis, buyers typically indicated that they would plan to be in a home 5 years or so, and sellers indicated that they had been in a home about 7 years. More recent data shows that people are staying longer, so sellers indicate that they've been in a home more like 10 years, and expectations have risen. So people do expect to stay for a little bit longer too. So I think people in the housing market do understand that concept. And I think what's also interesting to note is that renters typically move more frequently than homeowners. So they don't have the exact same buying and selling transaction costs, but it is expensive to move. And staying in one place, if you have a good job and good opportunities where you are, is a great way for you to build up some equity and be stable in the home that you have. So I think that's one of those things that we talk about, one of those benefits of homeownership, and why it might be a good thing to try to transition those renters into homeownership, and why the fact that we're not seeing that happen could be a concern for renters and their future financial well-being.
One of the statistics I thought was really interesting is where you find the most unequal distribution of incomes. It wasn't a surprise to me that Stamford, Norwalk, Connecticut, and New York City, in the New York area, those places for sure have really unequal distribution of income. But Miami was sort of interesting. I guess this is the super wealthy Latin Americans who have been moving in there and other people who are coming from across the pond and buying property there. And then also, I guess, U.S. citizens who are taking advantage of favorable tax rates. But New Orleans, you said, was found to have one of the most unequal distributions of income. Why New Orleans?
That's a great question. I think any area where you see a decent amount of high earning potential leads to the possibility for there to be a wide range, a big distribution of income. And I think, some of the disruptions that New Orleans has faced in the last decade with the hurricane and the recovery efforts, I think that could also play a role.
Interesting. And where did your report find is the most equal distribution of income between renters and homeowners?
Those tend to be in smaller cities across the country. And I should say that this report pulled that particular income data from the American Community Survey. So we're looking at two different types of inequality here, income inequality, but also wealth inequality. And obviously, in areas where it's more, incomes are more unequal, then it makes it more difficult for those on the lower side of the income distribution to build up a substantial amount of wealth. So they're two different components, but they're very much related when we're thinking about issues of inequality.
Perfect. Danielle Hale is the Director of Housing Statistics for the National Association of Realtors based in D.C. Hey, Danielle, thanks for being with us on Big Money Real Estate.
My pleasure.
I appreciate it. And thank you for watching this episode of Big Money Real Estate. You can send your real estate investing and personal finance questions to me through Twitter or Facebook, and be sure to share this video all around. Until next time, I'm Ilyce.